If you have $100 and no experience, and every time you try to learn investing, it feels like you've walked into a room where everyone's already mid-conversation, this is for you. Because the confusing part isn't that you're behind. The confusing part is that most investing content starts in the wrong place. It starts with words you don't have anchors for. It starts with opinions. It starts with noise. And then it leaves you with the same feeling you had before you clicked. I still don't know what I'm supposed to do first or why. So let me slow this down. If I had $100 and no experience, I would not try to be clever. I would not try to be fast. I would not try to pick the right thing. I would build one simple understanding first. Because when you understand the system, the decisions become obvious. And when you don't understand the system, every decision feels like a gamble. And that's the hidden reason beginners stall. Not laziness, not lack of intelligence, not lack of discipline. It's that everything feels like it has to be the perfect move, because you don't have a mental model for what investing actually is. So you hover, you watch another video, you save a post, you open an app and close it. You tell yourself you'll start when you know more. And months pass. Here's the truth that finally makes this feel manageable. Investing is not a test you pass once. It's not a trick you learn. It's not a single decision that determines your future. It's a repeated behavior, a boring one, a calm one. And your first goal with $100 is not to grow it. Your first goal is to place it inside a system that doesn't require you to be smart every week. Because the biggest risk for a beginner is not market ups and downs, it's friction. Friction is what stops people before they start. Friction is what makes you hesitate. Friction is what turns "I should do this" into "I'll do this later." So in this video, I'm going to do something most people never do, clearly. I'm going to take $100 and treat it like what it really is for a beginner, not capital. A starting point. A way to build the habit, the structure, and the mental clarity that makes the next $100 easier. And the $100 after that easier, until you're no longer trying to start. You've started. And just so you feel grounded the entire way through, there will be no hype here, no predictions, no this one move, no pressure. Just a calm explanation of what to do when you're at the exact point most people get stuck. I have a little bit of money, I don't have experience, I don't want to mess this up. That's a reasonable fear, because there are two different games you could accidentally play with your first $100. Game one is the entertainment game. That's where you chase a feeling. You chase certainty. You chase a story that sounds good. And your $100 becomes a ticket. Game two is the wealth building game. That's where your $100 is simply the first brick in a wall that gets built over years. Most beginners don't consciously choose which game they're in. They drift into the first one. Because it's louder, and because it looks like doing something. But quiet wealth is built in the second game, and once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. In a moment, I'm going to show you the single idea that separates those two games. Before we get there, notice something important about your $100. It's small enough that you can learn with it. That's actually an advantage. Because when the number is small, you can focus on the process instead of the pressure. You can practice making calm decisions. You can practice staying consistent. You can practice not reacting. That is the real skill. Not picking, not timing, not being right. The skill is building a system that keeps you steady when your emotions want to grab the steering wheel. And if you've ever felt that pull, the urge to wait for a better time, or the urge to make it worth it, or the urge to just do something exciting so it feels like progress, you're not broken. You're normal. Your brain is trying to protect you from uncertainty. But investing is mostly learning how to live with uncertainty in a controlled way. With a plan that doesn't require you to constantly make new decisions. So here's the promise I want to make to you right now, calmly, in plain English. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how I would start with $100 and no experience. Not as a list of tips, but as a clear system you can hold in your head. You'll know what matters. You'll know what doesn't. You'll know what you're trying to build. And you'll know how to avoid the most common beginner trap, turning investing into an emotional roller coaster. And later, once the foundation is clear, We'll talk about how this looks in real life when it's month 2, month 6, month 12, when the excitement fades and consistency becomes the whole game. But first, we need to make one thing make sense, because once it clicks, the rest becomes simple. Before we go any further, I want to be very clear about how to listen to this video. Not as advice, not as a recommendation, and definitely not as something you need to act on immediately. Think of this as orientation, like walking into a new city and being shown the layout before you're handed a map. Because most confusion around investing doesn't come from complexity. It comes from context being missing. People are taught fragments. They're shown pieces. They're given opinions without a frame. So you end up trying to assemble a picture without knowing what the picture is supposed to be. This section is about giving you that frame. And the reason this matters is simple. If you don't know what game you're playing, every move feels risky. If you don't know what role your money is supposed to play, every decision feels heavy. So let's ground this. I'm not approaching this as a trader. I'm not approaching this as someone trying to beat anything. I'm not approaching this as someone who believes investing is about being ahead. I'm approaching this the way long-term wealth is actually built for normal people, with jobs, responsibilities, distractions, and limited attention. Which means the priority is not maximizing outcomes. The priority is minimizing mistakes. Because beginners don't fail because they miss opportunities. They fail because they abandon the process. They stop because it feels confusing. They stop because it feels stressful. They stop because they don't trust their own decisions. And trust doesn't come from information. It comes from understanding. So the credibility here doesn't come from credentials or predictions. It comes from alignment with reality. Reality looks like this. Most people are busy. Most people don't want to think about markets every day. Most people just want a system that quietly works in the background while they live their lives. If that sentence feels relieving instead of disappointing, you're in the right place. Now, one important framing shift before we go further. When people hear investing, they imagine activity, buttons, charts, decisions. But investing in its most effective form is mostly inactivity. It's choosing a structure once and then repeating a simple behavior over a long period of time. The reason this feels counterintuitive is because we're wired to associate effort with motion. But with money, motion often creates friction. Every extra decision is a chance to hesitate. Every extra choice is a chance to second guess. Every extra opinion is a chance to feel like you're missing something. So the goal is not to be involved. The goal is to be consistent. That's the lens we're using. Another important thing to understand about this video. This is not about what to buy. It's about how to think. Because what you buy will change over time. How you think determines whether you stick around long enough for any of it to matter. So if at any point you catch yourself thinking, just tell me the thing, pause. That urge is normal. It's also the exact instinct that gets beginners into trouble. We're building a foundation that can hold weight. Now let's talk about the role of $100. Well, $100 is not meaningful because of its size. It's meaningful because of what it allows you to practice. With $100, you can practice committing without pressure, practice ignoring noise, practice staying steady when nothing exciting happens. That might sound underwhelming, but those 3 skills matter more than any early return. Because money compounds, yes, but behavior compounds faster. If you build the habit of calm consistency early, it scales naturally as the numbers grow. If you build the habit of reacting early, the stress scales with it. So when I talk about starting with $100, I'm not minimizing it. I'm respecting it. I'm treating it as the first repetition of a behavior you want to be able to repeat for years. And this brings us to one more critical framing point. This video is not about speed. There is no race here. There is no finish line you're late to. Wealth is not something you catch up to. It's something you grow into. And the people who look ahead are almost always the people who started calmly and stayed boring for a long time. They didn't rush the foundation. They didn't try to outsmart the process. They just stayed consistent when others got distracted. That's the path we're modeling. So as we move into the rest of this video, keep this mindset. You're not trying to get rich. You're trying to get stable. You're not trying to be impressive. You're trying to be resilient. You're not trying to predict anything. You're trying to remove as many decisions as possible. If you can hold that frame, everything that follows will make sense. And in a moment, I'll lay out exactly how this video is structured, so you always know where we are and why each part matters. Because clarity removes anxiety. And when anxiety is gone, consistency becomes possible. Before we go any deeper, I want you to know exactly how this video is going to unfold. Not because you need to remember every part, but because when you know the shape of what's coming, your brain relaxes. Uncertainty creates tension. Structure removes it. So here's the path we're taking. Calmly, step by step, without rushing ahead or skipping foundations. First, we're going to slow down and clarify what investing actually is at its core. Not what people say it is. Not what social media makes it look like. But what's really happening underneath all the noise. This matters because if you misunderstand the core idea, everything built on top of it feels shaky. Then, once that core idea is clear, we're going to expand it. We'll look at how beginners usually interpret investing, why that interpretation creates stress, and what's actually going on in real life when people build wealth slowly and quietly. I'll walk you through realistic situations, not best-case scenarios, not dramatic stories. Just normal moments where people either stay consistent or drift away. You'll start to see patterns, and once you see them, you'll understand why most people don't fail because they chose the wrong thing. They fail because they didn't build a system that could survive boredom, doubt, and distraction. After that, we'll gently translate this understanding into behavior. Not instructions, not a checklist, but a way of setting things up so future decisions become easier instead of harder. This part is about reducing friction, because the less friction there is, the less willpower you need. And willpower is unreliable over long periods of time. Finally, we'll bring everything together calmly. No urgency, no pressure, just a clear sense of what this looks like months from now, when the initial motivation is gone. And consistency is the only thing left doing the work. That's the entire arc. And throughout the video, I'll keep looping back to one simple question. Does this help a beginner stay consistent? If the answer is no, it doesn't belong here, because consistency is the real advantage. Now, there's something important to understand about the way this is structured. This is not meant to be consumed passively. Not because you need to take notes, you don't, but because you'll notice your instincts push back at certain points. You'll feel impatience, you'll feel the urge to skip ahead, you'll feel the desire for certainty. Those reactions are part of the learning process. They show you where your assumptions are. So when that happens, don't fight it. Just notice it. Because in a moment, when we start explaining the core concept, I'm going to explain the same idea multiple times, from different angles, using different examples. Not because it's complicated, but because understanding happens gradually. It clicks in layers. And each repetition removes a little more confusion. One more thing before we move on. This video is designed so that you don't need anything else to make sense of starting. You don't need prior knowledge, you don't need terminology, you don't need confidence. You just need patience. And if at any point you feel like, this is slower than I expected, that's intentional. Speed creates the illusion of progress. Clarity creates actual progress. So, here's where we're going next. We're about to define the single core idea that everything else rests on. The idea that explains why small, boring actions can outperform clever, exciting ones over time. The idea that turns investing from something stressful into something almost forgettable. And once that idea is clear, your $100 stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like the first repetition of a habit. Let's begin there. To understand what investing really is, we have to strip away almost everything people usually associate with it. No screens, no charts, no news, no predictions, because those things sit on top of the system. They are not the system itself. At its core, investing is a relationship between three things: time, behavior, and uncertainty. Most beginners focus on the uncertainty. That's the loud part. But the real work happens in time and behavior. So let's start there. Imagine planting a tree, not as a metaphor for growth, but as a system. When you plant a tree, the act itself is small. You dig, you place the seed, you cover it. That moment feels almost insignificant. What matters is what happens next. You don't dig it up every week to check if it's growing. You don't move it because another spot looks better. You don't abandon it because nothing visible is happening. You place it, and you let time do the work. Investing works the same way. Your $100 is not supposed to feel exciting. It's supposed to be placed. Placed inside a structure where time, not intelligence, does most of the heavy lifting. This is where beginners often get misled. They think investing is about choosing, about picking the right thing, about making a decision that proves they're doing it right. But choosing is the smallest part of the process. Staying is the whole thing. And staying requires one thing above all else: a structure that does not demand constant attention, because attention is expensive. Think about how many decisions you already make in a day. What to eat, where to go, what to respond to, what to ignore. Your brain is constantly filtering. So if your investing setup requires you to check frequently, react emotionally, reevaluate often, it will fail, not because it's bad, but because it competes for limited mental energy. This is why the most effective investing systems are boring. Boredom is not a flaw, it's a feature. Boredom means there's nothing pulling at your emotions, and emotions are the enemy of consistency. Now let's talk about what your $100 is actually doing. When you invest, you are not making money work. You are delaying consumption. You are choosing not to spend today in exchange for owning a small piece of future output. That's it. No magic. You're saying, I don't need this $100 right now. I'm going to let it sit inside a system that participates in economic activity over time. That's why time matters more than timing, because the value comes from duration, not precision. This is a hard shift for beginners, because everything around us rewards immediacy. Messages arrive instantly. Entertainment is on demand. Feedback is constant. Investing offers none of that. It gives you silence, and silence feels uncomfortable when you're new. So beginners try to fill the silence with action. They check, they tweak, they second guess, but every extra action increases the chance of making a mistake. So the core concept we're building toward is simple. The goal is not to make good decisions often. The goal is to make one good decision and then avoid making more. That's counterintuitive, but it's the foundation of long-term investing. Now let's slow this down even further. Your $100 is not meant to prove anything. It's not meant to test your skill. It's not meant to validate your intelligence. It's meant to train your behavior. Behavior is what compounds. If you learn to stay calm with $100, you'll stay calm with $1,000. If you learn to stay consistent with $100, you'll stay consistent with $10,000. But if you panic early, that pattern scales too. This is why starting small is powerful. It removes pressure. Pressure is what causes people to rush. Rush leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to regret. Regret leads to avoidance. Avoidance is how people quit without realizing they've quit. So the real objective at the beginning is not growth. It's familiarity. You're getting familiar with what it feels like to have money invested, to watch it move without reacting, to let time pass without interference. That familiarity creates comfort. Comfort creates consistency. Consistency creates results. Now let's talk about uncertainty. Because we can't avoid it. Uncertainty is not a risk to eliminate, it's a condition to accept. When you invest, you are accepting that outcomes vary, not because the system is broken, but because the future is unknown. Trying to eliminate uncertainty leads people to seek certainty in the wrong places. Predictions, opinions, short-term signals. These things feel comforting, they feel like control, but they often increase anxiety because they change constantly. The more inputs you consume, the more conflicted you feel. So the solution is not better predictions, it's fewer decisions. A good investing setup is one where uncertainty exists, but you don't need to respond to it. Like weather, you don't control the weather, but you dress appropriately and carry on. That's the relationship you want with markets. Now let's bring this back to the beginner mindset. Most beginners think the hard part is starting. It's not. The hard part is continuing when nothing exciting is happening. That's why the system matters more than motivation. Motivation fades quickly, systems persist. So when we talk about how I'd start with $100, what we're really talking about is, how do you design a setup that survives boredom? How do you reduce the number of moments where you have to decide what to do? How do you make inaction feel like progress? Because in investing, inaction is often the correct action. This is deeply uncomfortable at first. It feels like you're not doing enough. But that feeling comes from misunderstanding the role of time. Time is not empty. Time is working, even when nothing appears to be happening. Now, one more reframe. Investing is not something you do to money. It's something you do with yourself. You are practicing patience. You're practicing restraint. You are practicing long-term thinking in a short-term world. Those skills spill into everything else. That's why people who invest consistently often feel calmer about money overall. They've accepted uncertainty, they've reduced reactivity, they've built trust in a process. So the core concept is not complicated, it's just unfamiliar. You are not trying to win, you are trying to participate. You are not trying to be right, you are trying to stay invested. And your $100 is simply the smallest, safest way to begin that participation. We'll keep unpacking this from different angles, because understanding deepens with repetition. In the next part of this section, we'll look at how this plays out in the real world, what beginners usually think is happening, and what's actually happening underneath. Now let's look at why this idea feels so difficult to accept at first. Because on the surface, it sounds passive. And passivity feels wrong when you care. Most people associate responsibility with action. If something matters, you monitor it, you adjust it, you stay on top of it. So when you're told that the best thing to do is often nothing, it creates tension. That tension pushes beginners to over-engage. They think staying involved equals staying responsible. But in investing, responsibility looks different. Responsibility is not reacting to every movement. Responsibility is building a structure that doesn't require reactions in the first place. Let's slow this down with an everyday comparison. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning and debate whether brushing today is the optimal move. You don't analyze yesterday's outcome. You don't look for a better technique every week. You built a habit once, and then you remove decision-making from it. That's why it works. Investing should feel closer to that than to a strategy game. But beginners often treat it like a puzzle they need to solve repeatedly. And that's where fatigue sets in. Decision fatigue is subtle. At first, it looks like curiosity. You read, you watch, you learn. But over time, curiosity turns into pressure. You start to feel like you're missing something, like there's a right move you haven't found yet. Like starting now might be a mistake. So you delay. Delay feels safe, but it's expensive, not financially at first, psychologically. Because every delay reinforces the idea that investing is complicated and risky. So let's reframe delay. Delay is not caution, it's uncertainty with nowhere to go. Caution has a plan, and the plan for a beginner should be boring enough that it doesn't invite debate. Now, another important angle. Your $100 is not there to teach you about gains, it's there to teach you about emotions. When your money is invested, you'll notice things about yourself. You'll notice impatience, you'll notice doubt, you'll notice moments where you want to interfere. Those moments are the real lesson, because they show you how you'll react later when the numbers are larger. If you can learn to sit still early, you save yourself from costly mistakes later. This is why people who start small and stay consistent often outperform people who start big and stay emotional. Skill is not picking. Skill is staying. Let's talk about what usually breaks that skill. The first thing is comparison. When you start investing, you become aware that other people exist, they're doing different things, they're talking confidently, they're sharing opinions, and suddenly your quiet system feels inadequate. Comparison introduces urgency. Urgency creates action. Action creates mistakes. This is why your system must be personal and boring. Boring systems don't invite comparison. They don't look impressive. They don't generate stories. They just work quietly over time. Another thing that breaks consistency is misunderstanding volatility. Volatility just means movement. It doesn't mean danger. But beginners often interpret movement as feedback. Up feels like success. Down feels like failure. That emotional labeling is destructive. Because markets move for reasons unrelated to you. Your job is not to react to movement. Your job is to stay invested long enough for time to matter. This is why checking too often is harmful. The more often you check, the more noise you see. The more noise you see, the more emotions you feel. The more emotions you feel, the harder consistency becomes. So a good investing setup reduces visibility, not because things aren't happening, but because seeing everything doesn't help you. Think about a long road trip. You don't stare at the mile counter the entire time. You glance occasionally, then you focus on driving. Investing is the same. Now let's tie this back to the idea of participation. When you invest, you are joining an ongoing process. You're not controlling it. You're not directing it. You're participating. Participation means accepting that some days feel boring, some days feel uncomfortable, and most days feel like nothing at all. That's normal. In fact, that's ideal. If investing feels exciting all the time, something is wrong. Excitement usually means risk is concentrated, and concentration increases stress. So the core concept keeps coming back to this. Reduce decisions, reduce emotion, increase time. Everything else is secondary. Now, one more subtle but important shift. Many beginners think investing success comes from intelligence. It doesn't. It comes from behavior alignment. Smart people fail at investing all the time because intelligence makes it easier to overthink. Simple systems protect you from your own intelligence. They remove the temptation to interfere. And interference is the silent killer of long-term results. So if you take nothing else from this section, take this. Your first goal is not to make money. Your first goal is to become the kind of person who can leave money alone. That is the skill that matters. Once you have that skill, the rest becomes scalable. And in the next section, we're going to reinforce this idea using real-world scenarios, not hypotheticals, not extreme cases, just everyday situations where this core concept either holds or breaks. That's where it really starts to click. Now that the core idea is clear, we're going to reinforce it, not by adding complexity, but by showing how it plays out in real life. Because understanding something in theory is one thing, trusting it when emotions show up is another. This section is about closing that gap. Let's start with what beginners usually think is happening. They believe investing is a series of decisions. When to start, what to choose, when to adjust, when to stop. So every moment feels loaded. Every movement feels meaningful. But what's actually happening is much quieter. Most of the outcome is created by two things: how long you stay invested and how often you interrupt the process. Everything else is marginal. Now let's walk through some realistic beginner situations. Not dramatic ones, normal ones. Scenario 1. Someone starts with $100. They've watched a few videos. They feel cautiously optimistic. They invest and then they wait. A week passes. Nothing interesting happens. They check again. Still nothing. 2 weeks later, they notice a small change. It's not exciting, it's not alarming, but it's movement. And here's where the fork appears. One path says, this is normal. I'm participating in a long process. The other path says, is this it? Am I doing this wrong? If they take the first path, they stay. If they take the second path, they start looking. Looking introduces comparison. Comparison introduces doubt. Soon, they're not learning patience. They're learning hesitation. That's not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of framing. Scenario 2. Another beginner starts with $100. They invest and immediately feel relieved. They've finally started. But then they keep checking. Daily. Sometimes multiple times a day. Not because anything is wrong, but because their brain wants feedback, and markets don't give feedback on your timeline. So they see noise, up one day, down the next. And even if the numbers are small, the emotional reaction is real. They start associating investing with discomfort. Eventually, they decide it's too stressful. Not because it actually is, but because they've designed it to be. This is why reducing visibility matters. Not because you're avoiding reality, but because you're protecting behavior. Scenario 3. A beginner hears about investing from friends. Everyone has an opinion. Someone sounds confident, someone sounds excited, someone sounds sure. Suddenly, their quiet system feels inadequate. They feel like they're missing out. So they change something. Not because their plan was wrong, but because comparison made it feel wrong. This is one of the most common ways beginners derail themselves. Not through panic, but through subtle doubt. They don't quit outright. They just keep resetting. And resets destroy time. Now let's introduce a mental model. Think of investing like a conveyor belt. You place your money on the belt, and it moves forward slowly. Your job is not to walk alongside it constantly. Your job is not to adjust its speed. Your job is to not remove your item every few steps to check on it. Every time you take it off the belt, you reset progress. Another mental model. Think of investing like learning a language. You don't become fluent by cramming once, you become fluent by repeated exposure over time. Missing a day doesn't matter. Stopping entirely does. Consistency beats intensity. And that's true even when the progress is invisible. Now let's talk about time. Time is not just duration, it's sequencing. What happens first matters. If your first experience with investing is stressful, you build an association. Stress leads to avoidance. If your first experience is calm, you build trust. Trust leads to repetition. That's why starting with $100 is powerful. It lowers the emotional stakes. Now let's walk through a longer timeline. Month 1, you invest your $100. You feel cautious but stable. Nothing dramatic happens. Month 2, you add another $100. It feels easier this time. You're not learning how to invest anymore. You're learning how to repeat. Month 6, the habit exists. You don't think about it much. It's just something you do. This is where the real shift happens. Investing stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a routine. And routines are resilient. Now let's contrast that with the alternative timeline. Month 1, you invest $100, you check constantly, you react emotionally. Month 2, you change something, you feel uncertain again. Month 3, you pause. You tell yourself you'll restart when things are clearer. This path doesn't look like failure, it looks like waiting. But waiting is where momentum dies. Now let's look at what people usually think versus what's actually happening. People think, if I choose the right thing, I'll be fine. What's actually happening? If I stay invested long enough, the system does the work. People think, I need confidence to start. What's actually happening? Confidence comes from repetition, not information. People think, I'll start when I understand everything. What's actually happening? You understand by starting small and staying consistent. Now let's bring in one more real-life walkthrough. Imagine 2 people. Same income, same starting amount. Person A sets up a simple, boring system. They invest regularly. They rarely check. They don't change course often. Person B constantly adjusts. They react to opinions. They seek reassurance. They stop and restart. 10 years later, the difference is not intelligence, it's continuity. Time only compounds what stays put. That's the quiet truth most content skips. Now, one last reinforcement. Uncertainty never goes away. You don't graduate into certainty. You just become more comfortable not needing it. That comfort is the real skill, and it's built early with small amounts through calm repetition. In the next section, we're going to translate all of this into behavior, not tactics. Just simple ways to remove friction, reduce decisions, and make consistency feel natural instead of forced. That's where everything comes together. Now we move into the part that most people expect to come first. But it only works because everything before it is clear. This is not about instructions. It's about environment. Because behavior doesn't change when you try harder. It changes when you make the right behavior easier than the wrong one. So when we talk about how to apply this, we're really asking, how do you set things up so consistency happens almost by default? The first principle is reducing decisions. Every decision is a point of friction. Every friction point is a chance to stop. So the goal is to design a setup where you don't need to decide often, not daily, not weekly, not even monthly. You decide once, and then you repeat. This is why simplicity matters more than optimization. A simple setup you stick with beats a perfect setup you abandon. Now think about how people usually try to apply investing ideas. They look for confirmation. They look for timing. They look for reassurance. All of those increase mental load. Mental load leads to hesitation. So instead, the application here is about removing the need for reassurance altogether. You do that by narrowing your focus, not to outcomes, not to short-term movement, but to the behavior you're repeating. Your only job is to repeat a calm action at a steady pace. That's it. If that sounds too easy, that's because we're conditioned to believe effort must feel intense. But long-term success rarely feels intense. It feels uneventful. Now let's talk about patience. Patience is often misunderstood as waiting. It's not. Patience is staying engaged without needing feedback. It's continuing even when nothing validates the effort. That's why early investing feels uncomfortable. You're acting without immediate confirmation, so the setup needs to support that. One way it does this is by spacing out attention. You don't need to watch constantly. You don't need updates. You don't need commentary. The less often you engage, the less emotional noise you experience. And the less noise you experience, the easier patience becomes. Next, consistency. Consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from predictability. When something happens at the same time, in the same way, with the same expectation, it becomes automatic. Automatic behavior doesn't rely on mood. So the application here is not try to be consistent. It's remove the need to decide whether to be consistent. You want the behavior to feel almost boring. Boring is reliable. Now let's talk about friction. Friction is anything that makes a behavior harder than it needs to be. Too many options, too much information, too many opinions. Each one adds resistance. So the calm approach is to limit inputs, not because more information is bad, but because more information invites more doubt. You don't need constant reinforcement. You need stability. Another key element here is expectations. Expectations shape emotions. If you expect excitement, you'll be disappointed. If you expect boredom, you'll be comfortable. So the healthy expectation is this: most of the time, nothing interesting will happen. That's not a problem. That's the system working as intended. When you accept that up front, you don't feel the urge to intervene. Now let's talk about behavior over time. The first few repetitions feel deliberate. You're aware of what you're doing. After a while, awareness fades. The behavior becomes routine. That's when the system starts to protect you. You're no longer asking, should I do this? You're just doing it. And that's when consistency becomes effortless. One more important application principle: separate your identity from outcomes. You are not good or bad at investing based on short-term results. Results fluctuate. Behavior is what matters. When you tie your identity to behavior instead of outcomes, you stay steady. You don't take movement personally. You don't interpret noise as feedback. You just continue. This is how investing becomes emotionally sustainable. And emotional sustainability is what keeps people in the game long enough for time to matter. So if we condense this entire section into one sentence, it's this: set things up so the calm action is the easiest action. Everything else flows from that. And in the final section, we're going to slow everything down again. We'll bring this back to the bigger picture, what this looks like years from now, and how this foundation connects to what comes next. Without urgency, without pressure. Just clarity. At this point, everything important has already been said. Not because there's nothing more to learn, but because the foundation is now in place. And foundations are quiet by nature. If you zoom out and look at what we've really done in this video, it's this. We've taken something that usually feels overwhelming and reduced it to a simple relationship between time, behavior, and uncertainty. We've removed the pressure to be clever. We've removed the pressure to act constantly. We've removed the idea that starting requires confidence. Instead, we've reframed starting as participation. You're not trying to predict the future. You're not trying to outsmart anything. You're not trying to get it right. You're placing a small amount of money into a system and then allowing time to do what time does best. That's not dramatic. It's not exciting. And it's not something people boast about, but it's how real wealth is built. Quietly, gradually, without constant interference. So if you're sitting here with $100 and you feel calmer than when you started, that's the signal that this approach fits you. Calm is not a lack of ambition. Calm is clarity without urgency. And clarity is what keeps people consistent long after motivation fades. Now let's talk about what happens next, not as a call to action, but as orientation. Once you understand this core idea, future learning becomes easier. You'll start to notice that many investing conversations are actually about the same thing, just dressed differently. You'll see when something adds complexity without adding stability. You'll recognize when excitement is being used to mask uncertainty. You'll feel less pressure to react because you know what your role actually is. And most importantly, you'll stop feeling like you're late. There is no late in a system built on repetition. Every repetition counts the same, regardless of when it happens. So if you start now, calmly, you're not behind anyone. You're exactly where you need to be. In the next video, we're going to build directly on this foundation, not by adding tactics, not by introducing noise, but by addressing the next natural question beginners have once they've started. How do I stay consistent when life gets busy, motivation drops, and attention gets pulled in other directions? Because understanding the system is one thing. Living with it over time is another. And consistency, as you now know, is where everything is decided. So for now, let this settle. There's nothing you need to rush into, nothing you need to optimize, nothing you need to prove. Just a clear understanding of what investing actually is and what your first $100 is really for. A starting point, a repetition, a calm entry into a long process that doesn't require perfection. That's enough. And when you're ready, we'll take the next step together. Slowly, clearly, and without pressure.